day for a month? I could barely survive every day for a month. Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Liberty and I make booktube content. It's January 1st and obviously a new year, a new reading challenge. But I'm also intrigued by the January Pages challenge that Storygraph has started. The other day when I was, minding my own business, wasting my time scrolling through Storygraph, I noticed that they had a fun little new addition to the reading challenge area, which was cited as the January Pages Challenge 2022. What is this, I wondered? The one rule is that basically you just have to log a bit of reading, be it one page or more, every single day during January. And I thought, go on then, it'll give me a boost. All right then, I will press join challenge and see where it takes me. Okay, I'm part of the challenge, eventually. To give you all a bit of an update, I am currently reading The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. Now, this obviously isn't literary fiction, it obviously isn't a classic, it's what my mother calls pulp fiction, and it is deeply enjoyable. I only started it yesterday and I'm already 20% of the way through and really just enjoying all the ciphers and riddles. That's the bit of pages that Storygraph has quite helpfully added towards the challenge so far for me. And tomorrow I will be back with more reading, hopefully, that's the idea. Yeah, I'll update you as I go along. Well, hello there. Bit of an update. It's now January the 5th, I believe. Maybe 6th. I have read a couple of books and so far have managed to keep up with the January Pages challenge. I did have a bit of a scare yesterday when I was looking back on Tuesday because I read on the train to see a friend but then didn't actually get a chance to log it on my Storygraph for the day and then didn't have another chance to read the rest of the day while I was with them. And I thought, oh my god, I've ruined everything. But luckily, because I had been reading at a bit of a late hour the previous evening, I'd actually logged some pages from the previous day at about 2 a.m, which counted, luckily. So all is well, I am still doing the challenge, I'm still successful, and I am enjoying what I'm reading. The book I'm reading at the moment is The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I'm only a little bit of the way in, about a quarter I think, but it's quite dense. I'm finding the language a little bit hard to get into, but also there are some really funny lines already and the themes are just very interesting. So, I'll give you some more thoughts when I have some more thoughts, but so far I can say that I'm enjoying it. That was one of my books on the list for 2022 to get through, one of the ones that's been hanging about on my shelves for a while. So yay, getting to that. Hello, so it's now the 9th of January and I can give you some more detail on what I've been reading. I've made quite a bit of progress. Let's start with the fact that I have still managed to stay up to date with my January reading challenge. I can give you proof. Hang on. Bam. So as you can see, I am 8 for 8 on days. It updates like the full 24 hours into a day, if that makes sense. Now, the really fun thing is that I decided, spur of the moment, as I was walking past a stationery shop that had a sale, that I was going to be, a bougie reader. I was going to buy a notebook specifically to be a reading log. So feeling a bit fancy, feeling a little bit like I am a booktuber, I got this quite lovely one, which is sort of apparently in the Japanese lacquerwork style. I think it's very gorgeous and I've been having fun putting together some pages, so I might as well go through what I've decided as my 2022 reading goals in general. Firstly, I'm going to go for 60 books because last year my original reading challenge was actually only 30 books, but I passed that quite easily by the summer. So I decided to extend it to 50 and then actually ended up getting 55, which I was quite proud of. Not so much because of the number, but because I felt proud of the fact that I had kind of pushed through and read quite widely, made some interesting strides into the literary world, if you will. So I decided 60 this year to take it up a notch. we'll see. We'll see. However, I think the one that's going to be the most challenging is my pages goal, which I've decided to do as well. Last year I put 20,000 pages, and that was a reasonably close one kind of towards the end of December. But I decided to go for 22,000 this year, 2022, 22,000. And that might be the challenging one, because it was something like 60 pages a day. I looked it up recently, can't remember now. My Cambridge days are too busy for 60 pages on the average day. I can always, furiously read in the holidays if needs be. But otherwise, I've decided to give myself a few other little challenges for the year, kind of goals mostly. The first one is the Decades Challenge, which I've seen some people do before. I can't remember who, but if I can work out which booktuber I saw do it, I'll put them in the description. Essentially, it was just that, I'd kind of pick a bunch of decades and try and... Okay, maybe I don't really know what this is about. What I'm doing is I'm giving myself all the decades from the 1800s, zeros, all the way to the 1990s. And I'm going to try my hardest to tick off a bunch of those decades. And essentially it's just a tool for kind of, reading a bit more variously. And I've made some progress on that one, but we'll get to that later. The other challenge, aside from the January Pages challenge, which you already know about, is the Read Around the World challenge, which I've seen Emmy do, and I think there are others, but it's to read literature from places that I've not read from before, or not very many times, and especially to try and get, authors from that nation speak on their own sort of experience and the history of that nation and the climate and the situation. And yeah, again, just diversify my reading, try and just understand more about the world when, it's quite easy to fall into the trap, especially with classics, of really only reading from kind of UK, US, Western Europe, maybe Russia, because unfortunately our canon is biased. That one I haven't actually really made any strides with yet, but to be fair, I've only read 3 books. So I will update you all on that one as it happens. So I've got a couple of nice little pages here with my thoughts on each of these books. I'm basically a bullet journaler at this point. Firstly, the Da Vinci Code. I have the book downstairs, I just can't be bothered to get it. I'll be honest. It had an interesting feminist perspective, bearing in mind it was a male author. And I definitely was quite intrigued by the way that there was, reasonably feminist undertones for a book that was released in 2003. Not so much feminist as we might call it today, I won't lie to you, but just, at a basic level, the central character is a scholar and he is a symbologist from Harvard. He cringes a bit at some comments that another character makes, which are, sexist. And it's interesting that the whole mystery centers around the sacred feminine and the goddess worship that, most religions have had. Basically, the emphasis was on the fact that there needs to be unity and equality and all these things, which was, reasonably surprising for a book that I was expecting to kind of have, a little tasty bit of subliminal misogyny, Oh, hang on, I haven't even given you a kind of rundown. Right, so rundown. There's the symbologist at Harvard, like I said, and he's called up by the police while he's in Paris, and they're like, oh, there's this body and it's really creepy. It's got a symbol on it and we're confused. Can you help? And he's like, sure, this is weird. I will tell you what I know about symbols. And then this whole mystery devolves where basically it turns out the guy who's died, Jacques Saunier, is trying to kind of explain some mystery or tell of a secret with this kind of code that he's left. It's up to Robert and also Saunier's granddaughter, who's a cryptologist, to kind of decipher these codes and try and sort of follow the mystery where it leads and unearth this whole big secret that Jacques Saunier had hidden from everyone. And it's all very dramatic, and there's kind of, mystery and intrigue, and I won't go into too much detail because I obviously don't want to spoil it, but I did think there was a lot of interesting conversation about demonization of religion, and also about the difference between power-hungry people who are kind of minority within religious faiths and the meaning of the faith itself, which was very interesting. I also thought the twist as to who the baddie was genuinely quite surprising. It might just be that I wasn't particularly using my frontal lobe at the time, but I was surprised. and I thought that was done really well. So on the whole, the 600 pages flew by. I wrote that just here. It was definitely quite a cracker and kept me entertained, and I really liked it. Small side note, some of the history and history of art stuff definitely could have done with a bit of, how should I say, counterbalancing, because it's definitely all kind of cited as fact when actually a lot of what he's saying is kind of myth or, you know, unproven. And I didn't kind of appreciate like how much of what was going on was actually kind of unproven until I watched the film version, and they have a much more skeptical Robert Langdon against other characters who were like fully on board with the whole myth. So it kind of demonstrated that like what might be cited as fact in the book is kind of a little bit shaky. Otherwise, there was also a transphobic comment in a park scene, which I won't dwell on too much, but I was a bit like, right, okay, stop. So in the end, I gave the Da Vinci Code 4.25 stars. You know, that's quite high. I was quite entertained. Do you know what? Sometimes books are just good because they're entertaining. No deeper meaning. It was great. And the second book that I read this year, I say that like it's been much of the year. It's literally day 9. But anyway. And the next one I read was Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. First of all, I love this cover. Look at that gold foiling. It's just gorgeous. Anyway. So according to what I've got written here, it was a satisfying twist and very interesting characters. I also really liked the fact that there was kind of a circular narrative, like in a not particularly deep way, but it just began with a scene, a kind of exposition by some sort of third person characters, like in a Shakespeare, you know, they just kind of turn up to like say something and be a bit comedic for a minute, and then they go off again and you never see them again. But this time they were in the first scene and then they show up right at the end again to do a similar thing, which I thought was quite funny and I appreciated it. And yeah, I thought the mystery was really good. I again didn't see who it was, but then again I wasn't particularly trying because obviously I already knew going in that Agatha Christie novels, though absolutely groundbreaking and sort of, you know, genre defining, they don't hold up so well to modern crime thriller audiences because they have less kind of depth and subplots and all these things that modern thrillers would. So I kind of also, I knew from experience that like you can quite easily guess if you try. So I didn't want to do that. I just let it wash over me. But I've also heard that Death on the Nile is one of her best ones. So I was looking forward to it. And I definitely think that's true because it was quite a surprising murderer in the end. And it was also just a really beautiful setting because it's set along the River Nile, obviously, where this bunch of people have kind of coincided on this holiday trip abroad, including Hercule Poirot, the detective. The writing didn't kind of, you know, wow me, but I was entertained and I thought it was interesting and the characters were quite well done. So in the end, I gave it 3.5 stars. And then another book that I finished last night was The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Now this one is obviously quite the classique. Apparently it's one that's kind of done all the time in school in America. That might not be true, but I can understand why it would be used quite often because it's short, although deceptive because it's extremely dense writing. It's short and it's also got some like reasonably obvious, quite interesting themes going on, which obviously would be very good for analysis, you know, in secondary schools. Personally, I hadn't got a kind of preconception of what this was about, even though, you know, a lot of classics, there's a kind of a cultural dissemination of what the story is about. I hadn't had that with this one, perhaps because it is more kind of big and canon in the USA rather than the UK, but it certainly, I kind of had the idea that it was about like a woman being charged with a crime, but it was really, really interesting. It's about a woman who essentially she commits adultery because she has arrived as a Puritan pilgrim in New England and has declared herself married, but after 2 years of being there, her husband hasn't arrived and everyone's kind of thinking, oh, her husband's dead, but she gets pregnant and she has clearly been adulterous in the fact that she's declared herself married, but then had sex with someone else, got pregnant, and as it's a Puritan settlement, obviously there is quite the outcry. And her punishment is primarily to wear this giant red A on her chest as a kind of signal of her kind of moral depravity and as a kind of lesson for everyone else. She's supposed to be cut off from society kind of morally and emotionally and all these things. It's a very harsh sentence, but it's also so interesting the way that kind of Hester, the character, uses this punishment as a kind of avenue for personal growth. There are a few passages which detail the way that she kind of, in her years of being sort of cut off from society, she's still living literally like kind of on the edge of the settlement, but she's just not kind of allowed in society. And she uses that time to really kind of delve deep into her religion and her philosophy and her politics. And there are a few passages that really discuss the way that she keeps coming to this kind of abyss of knowledge or of understanding. And it really sort of demonstrates the way that her time sort of outside the lines of social convention has unearthed the ways that social convention might be wrong. It's really interesting that she grows and has this new perspective on everything around her because of the crime and the punishment that she has committed according to these other people. One of my favourite bits of imagery in the whole thing is the fact that her adultery is only discovered because she gets pregnant, and this child that's born she calls Pearl. She and Pearl kind of live in this little cottage at the edge of the community, and she raises Pearl again outside of social convention, perhaps not even necessarily meaning to, but just because of the situation that they're in and the way that, you know, Pearl isn't allowed playmates of the other children, and she is given kind of just nature and her mother for company. And so Pearl grows up, and all of the imagery around her is that of kind of sprites and fairies and elves and, you know, Satan's spawn, but it comes across as this child that is sort of the bridge between the natural and the wild, and the nature as a kind of force that's trying to pull people in away from this sort of this civilization, which becomes like the antithesis for nature. And Pearl is kind of in between these two spheres. And she is also, as I was about to say, the imagery that I thought was so interesting was the way that she wears extremely interesting clothing, because her mother kind of expels all of her creative and like mental energy on clothing Pearl in, you know, non-Puritan clothing. One of the most sort of detailed pieces of clothing that is shown in the book is this dress that is red and beautiful with gold embroidery, and it's supposed to visually and mentally tie the red A on Hester's chest to this child. It's a very effective piece of imagery, and I really loved it. And there was just so much interesting philosophy in here. And sort of the kind of mystery that's supposed to be unfolding during this novel is who the father is, and sort of how the sin is bearing out on Hester and the father in turn. I guessed who the father was kind of immediately because it's quite obvious, but it is also really interesting, and was just overall a very interesting story. The bit that really just made me like kind of impressed was that I did not go into this expecting it to be autobiographical, but then it turned out that like the first chapter is, and it's from the perspective of Nathaniel Hawthorne. He was in charge of a customs house in Salem, and finding this kind of wad of documents which someone before him had compiled, which was detailing the real life story of Hester Prynne. So it begins autobiographical and then flips back in time, but is still at root a factual story, even if obviously with some fictitious sort of artistic license. This was also another tick on the Decades Challenge because it was from 1850, so the 1850s. Nice. In the end, I gave this book 3.5 stars. So that's all the updates from me. I haven't really made much progress with The Eye of the World. Whoops. Do I have an excuse? No. However, it's prompting me to read a lot of other things. It's a pro and a con. As to what I'm reading next, I actually don't know. I probably should get on with The Eye of the World, but otherwise, I have so many books to choose from. Oh my gosh, I should give you a book haul. Fantastic. Basically, went to Waterstones and spent all my Christmas money and book vouchers and things that I'd accumulated, and had an extremely exciting experience just kind of wandering the shelves and picking what I'd heard of that was good and just, you know, choosing at whim basically, whereas usually it's kind of an agonizing, oh my gosh, what one book can I get kind of process. Else I get a bunch of secondhand classics, you know, at a time, maybe 3 or 4. But, you know, going to Waterstones and buying just a bunch of books, chef's kiss. I ended up getting 9 books and I will show them to you now. We had Swimming in the Dark by Tomasz Jadrowski. We had The Year of the Hare by Arto Pasolina. We had Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee. We had The Travelling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arakawa. We had A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. Summer by Ali Smith. Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, because I absolutely adored Evelyn Hugo. I read that just before the end of the year. And finally, The Union of Synchronized Swimmers by Christina Sandhu. I also got a few for Christmas just from people, so I'll say those now. The first being Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. Also Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. Those are from my brother. And then from my dad, I got The Familiars by Stacey Halls, Circe by Madeline Miller, and The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. So overall, I'm feeling like I'm quite well endowed with books, shall I say. I have quite the lot to choose from right now, and I really don't know what I'm going to do. And that's not even getting onto the fact that I have an absolute ton of books on my Kindle that I've already bought or I'm planning to buy. What a tragedy. I just have too many books to choose from.
Public know what this company does, to let them know where it operates, let them know how it operates.
Disaster struck. As you can see from the last clips, I have travelled back to Cambridge. Came back on the 12th, and I thought, oh, I'm going to be really sensible. I'm going to get my booster jab in as soon as possible. So I booked it for the 13th. However, turns out if you A, have had COVID recently, and B, had a bad reaction to the first jab, you're likely to have a bad reaction to the booster as well. And guess what? I tick both boxes. So shall we just say I got a bit sick. Long story short, I messed up the January Pages challenge. I can't believe it. I was doing so well. The first full day back in Cambridge, and it all went down the drain. So that's great, but it's fine. It's fine. I'm only kind of crying in the inside, but the good news is it's now the 15th and I feel a lot better. So I've managed to read today. I've managed to leave my room so I can, you know, get back on track, but just means that I have not completed the challenge. Here, I'll show you. Look, the bar is shorter than it should be. It's not 100% anymore. Everything's ruined. But before I came down with a horrible fever, I did finish the book that I'd started a day or two before, which was Perfect on Paper by Sophie Gonzalez. I thought it was really fun, and I definitely think it's high on the list of romances in general. I thought the pacing and the construction and all of that stuff was a lot better than a lot of romances I've read before. So all was well on the 12th, basically, and then the 13th, it all went wrong. So as of now, as of the 15th, I am still reading Eye of the World, and I will be for the foreseeable future. But I haven't actually picked anything else to start yet. I don't know what the mood is. I'll let you know. Okay, so it's now the 16th and I've come to the conclusion after much deliberation that I actually have too much content for this to go on the whole month. I've already filmed quite a lot, so in the interests of not getting anyone too bored, I'm going to cut this one off now and make a part 2 to the January Pages Challenge reading vlog. Please do join me in the next video to find out what I'm reading for the rest of the month. And I will be hopefully continuing to read every day, as if I hadn't already kind of slightly messed up the challenge, but we can only forgive ourselves. So yeah, please do come along to find out what I thought about the first couple of chapters of the Travelling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arakawa, and to find out all the rest of what I'll be reading this month. I hope everyone has a good day. Goodbye everyone.